So, David, start with you. Go ahead, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is David Duguid. I'm Vice President of Knowledge and Insights for the National Dairy Council. We are funded by America's Dairy Farmers, and our mission is to drive sales and trust in dairy products. My primary responsibility is measuring and evaluating an in-school program we have called Fuel Up to Play 60, designed to help kids get 60 minutes of exercise a day and eat better. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa Davies. I'm with the Kellogg Company, and I'm a Senior Manager of Behavioral Science on our Shopper Insights team, so dedicated to Shopper Insights. So I support really the behavioral science capability of our Shopper Insights researchers out in the field that support retailers and channels that we support. And prior to that, I was actually out in the field. I've done work with Walmart and Target. So really excited to be here and talk to you all today. Great. Oh, got one.
Hi, Kristen DeGraff. I am a Senior Manager of Consumer Insights at Constellation Brands. For those of you who don't know, it's a beverage alcohol company. I work in the beer division here in Chicago, so I am responsible for consumer insights on our largest beer brands, Corona and Modelo, and primarily supporting the brand marketing, brand management teams in development of advertising and marketing programs to grow those brands.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here with you today. My name is Richard Tanner, and I work at Career Builder. A couple interesting things about me. One, when you think of Career Builder, you probably think of a job board, the candidate side. So the other side of Career Builder is actually a B2B human capital software solutions provider. So if you go to careerbuilder.com, it's one distinct experience. If you go to hiring.careerbuilder.com, you're probably an employer figuring out how to find, hire, and manage great people. And that's the focus of what I do on a daily basis. The other interesting thing about my role is I head consumer insights on the B2B side, but I don't work within a consumer insights team. I'm actually embedded within the marketing function. So when I go to team meetings, I go to meetings with people like product marketers and demand gen marketers and website marketers. And I kind of serve as an internal resource and a researcher and a consultant within that team. So I get exposed to a lot of interesting stuff. So hopefully I'll be able to provide some good perspective for all of you. Thank you.
And I am Julie Schemenauer. I'm also at the Kellogg Company. I am a senior manager also on behavioral science. I'm on the consumer side though, so my stakeholders are more so marketing, our QNT, and our agency partners. I've been in that role for about a year, embedding behavioral science kind of throughout the organization, and prior to that I led all of our innovation and comms testing for Kellogg North America.
Good, great panel, thanks guys. All right, I'll get this started. And Julie, since you've got the mic in your hand, you can start with this one. What would cause you to start looking for a new research supplier or suppliers?
I would say it definitely ebbs and flows. So there are times, I've been with Kellogg for 10 years now, and there are times where everyone wants to bring the shiny new toy, right, or the shiny new vendor type of research. There's times where procurement kind of puts the smack down a little bit and says, nope, these are the two that we've negotiated with and you can use. I would say right now, with as quickly as the world is changing, as quickly as consumers are changing and all of the choices, it's definitely wide open and we are always looking. We're always looking to see what's out there. I would say it's a more calculated risk probably than we ever have before. So while we're always open for looking, we're definitely looking at ROIs, and budgets are tight right now. And so it's definitely making sure that when we do bring somebody in, we're very confident that they're going to bring us what we need and the insights we need.
Kristen, since you have the other mic.
The times when I can think about looking for a new research vendor partner would be honestly when the current ones that I'm working with are under-delivering in some way, or it just kind of feels like we're maybe doing something repetitively and it's getting a little bit stale or doesn't seem to be generating the same, inspiration for the teams that I support as it used to.
So let me follow up on that, and then you all can jump in. So if it is time to look for a new one because your current providers are underperforming, what are the 2 or 3 criteria you kind of focus on when you are out shopping for new providers?
I think the first one that comes to mind would be a partner that seems to be thinking about things differently. So, a lot of the research we're doing is not terribly unique, in what we're trying to answer. It's more looking for a new methodology or a way that feels like it's more in touch with consumers today than a lot of, traditional marketing research. So that's one. I think another one that often comes to mind would be a company that at least has some experience in our category or can find some way to, say that they've worked in an analogous category that makes me think they would do well with beverage alcohol and kind of the dynamics going on in that
Okay.
category.
David, you want to give that a shot?
Well, I think as we evaluate suppliers, many of the techniques and the processes are very similar. So we're looking for something that can make a particular company stand out. How is it different? And also, I would add thought leadership. So have I seen something from that organization previously where they've really provided a point of view, made me think maybe differently about something I've been doing? So I think for me personally, having that thought leadership and a point of view is something that I really look for.
Anybody else, Richard?
Yeah, sure. So I would say for me, because I work for a tech company and am thinking about tech on a daily basis, I would probably be intrigued by an agency or a vendor that was leveraging technology in a new way and it essentially matched with our philosophy as an organization. So I think what's interesting is when you work in B2B, we try to sell our solutions into a lot of companies, and one of the things we try to focus on is if there's good partnership capability by having similar cultures or having similar thought processes or similar views on the way that we go about our day-to-day and that we conduct business. So I think one thing that would probably pique my interest is if I saw something new that kind of, whether it was thought leadership or something else, but it kind of challenged my way of thinking, but it was also technology enabled or it leveraged technology in some way, I would probably say, maybe I should have a dialogue about that and have an opportunity to learn something.
That's great. Melissa?
Yeah, I think we're always looking for new, fresh, and different, especially focused on behavioral science in our roles and kind of pushing that to our teams. So obviously credibility in the behavioral science space, not just saying System 1 methodologies, but really knowing it. So, and then I would also, on the shopper side, we really need strong deliverables. So I hope I'm not skipping ahead, but when you think about your marketing, like I'm looking at that, and when I have a capabilities call, like how you're presenting to me is how I think about how you're going to present to my bigger teams and what your deliverables look like. So I feel like those are kind of two pieces that are really important too.
Good, thanks. Any questions now from you guys? I've got a couple more, but they're here for you. Microphones, are we going to have to just pass one of these out? Can I take that, Melissa? Thanks, Colleen. Excuse me.
I think this is a little bit more for Richard Tanner because the company I work for is a tech company for research firms. And when you were saying you look for something that's kind of more new technology, I found in the past year we've had 3 companies come to us and the buyer was actually from the IT department. Is that something that's kind of becoming more and more common now?
Yeah, it is. That's actually a really good point. So, like I said before, my day-to-day, what I live and breathe is software and software solutions, more specifically in the human capital management side. But one of the things that we've seen in that space that I think translates well over to what you're saying is when you are trying to position your offering or you're trying to prove the case of what you're doing, it's no longer just that department in the room, it's a committee. And so it might be someone from IT, it's probably the CFO or someone from finance. Because if you think about business, and I think you made the point about the speed of business and the velocity of change, there's a lot more, I'm going to start using tech terms, I'm sorry, but like integrations and data sharing that needs to take place across an entire organization. And so it can't just serve the needs of one, at least in businesses that are very strategic, it can't just serve the needs of one person. So I think in much the same way with research, you'll not necessarily need to get buy-in from everyone, but they'll need to be aware because some of the information you provide or the insights you give might serve other areas of the business. And that's what we see a lot is, especially when I'm in meetings with product marketing and demand gen and site optimization, they all have a very different lens that they're looking at things. So if we're providing insights or research, we've got to make sure that there's kind of a collective buy-in on the front end. Otherwise, it's frustrating for me internally, but it's also going to be frustrating for you all as suppliers of that. And it just creates a lot of friction that can, damage relationships. So,
Thank you.
Hi there. I want to try to mesh in what you're saying now, what you've just said about what you look for in a new partner with everything we've been learning about today. So is there an example in your own minds that you could speak of where you actually, how did you meet this new player? Of all the marketing methods we've heard about today, what worked for you, what didn't? Did anybody reach you through email marketing, for example? Or was that at a conference? Like, can you just play it out like day in the life scenario of how did you really meet this new market research partner?
Julie, you want to take a crack at this?
Yeah, one way that works really well for us is in the ZBB environments and things like this in CPG, anytime there's a webinar or anytime there's information you can offer to us to help us get ahead, that's going to engage us. If it's white papers that are written or anything like that, or a new technology that maybe one of our peers in the industry has used and has been successful for them. Just knowledge sharing, I would say, more than kind of a direct sales. Is helpful. I would say other than that, large companies, especially like Kellogg, can be very siloed. So a lot of times there's been work done in Kellogg Canada that we don't know about, and it's a strong vendor. So just sharing that of, hey, your partners up in Canada just did this methodology on Special K, would you like to see the report? I think even helping us kind of break down those internal barriers and silos that we have is helpful.
Actually, I'd like all of you to answer this question. So do you mind passing the mic down and kind of each taking a crack at the methodologies that connect best with you?
I'll think on it.
So I do think email marketing can work. I can think of a couple of new partners that we worked with in the last couple of years where, the conversation did start via email. And what made them unique was somewhat similar to what had been said. They were willing to share some research that they had done that, was on our category, it was relevant to us, and, they would come right out and share that. They didn't kind of hold that close to the vest until they were able to negotiate a call with us and, figure that out. They just sent it and said, I thought you might be interested in this. I think that was impressive, and it started the conversation. And then the other one was, a vendor that just in a very timely way, there was something that had been going on in the industry that was, newsworthy and of course would be on our minds as a company. And so kind of just engaging the conversation through that and showing that there was some understanding, some, relevance to the category. They were following the category and trying to understand what our needs might be, not just trying to push, on us what their methodology was. It just showed a different level of, I think, engagement and willingness to kind of put in some work to really understand what our needs might be. So I think those were both really great examples that of email that kind of cut through the clutter.
I would add conferences as well and make sure, I think someone made a point earlier about having a client that you worked with before up there as well. Adding to the credibility again, I think that's extremely important, especially if it's a client that's within the industry, like the beer industry or CPG. I think that's adds credibility. I also look for, okay, what other vendors like on your website have you, or what other clients do you have? And I look and I know kind of who's best in market for what they do from a research standpoint. Also, retailers being on the shopper side. I mean, are you doing work with Walmart or CVS? I mean, that shows that you're a credible, research company that I'd want to pursue. And also word of mouth. So if you do have a successful project with a client, and make sure they talk about it somehow, or maybe you cut them a discount. They put some quotes on your email that you send out. I think again that credibility, because we get so many emails. A lot of times I'm just delete, unless there's something in there that really triggers me. And those are kind of the pieces that I really look for.
And I would also add that I think the webinar idea is a great one, where there's a case study being shared, and it's not just about your technique, but what that technique allowed your client to learn, or how it improved their business in some way. And I think importantly, after that webinar, rather than I get a lot of email follow-ups, I think for me personally, a phone call as a next step, trying to engage me. You know, what did you hear? What did you like? Can we, continue the conversation? I think that's really important for me.
I want to ask the panelists a question. Raise your hand if your company uses a procurement department to help find research suppliers. Just Kellogg. Okay. I get that question a lot, actually, because these are my clients out here, too, and they ask me, what do we do with procurement departments? Do you mind responding to that? If there's a way for research suppliers to work with, navigate with procurement departments?
I think the more that they can still connect with insights or marketing or who they're trying to sell to, I think could help, because we still have a say. So we work very closely, and they kind of they formalize the process for us, of course, but they don't have the knowledge of the industry of what we're trying to do and what works and what doesn't. So although they're looking for bottom line, we still influence kind of who stays in RFPs and who doesn't, and usually we're the ones that kind of start with who the RFP even goes to. I would say sometimes what I wish our procurement department could be better at is almost casting the net a little bit wider for us. There are times when I'm looking for someone in a certain space and I don't even know who's out there. And so that's another way that just kind of keeping in contact with procurement departments to make sure that you're top of mind, or they at least know who your company is and kind of what they do, so that when we do go and want to cast a net. But I would say procurement department can kind of cause things to go longer in some cases when we're doing RFPs and there are hurdles. It's not a barrier per se. I mean, we do still influence procurement and who they go after and who we talk to, and at the end of the day, who the bid is, because we're responsible for that, and we need someone who we know can get the job done.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Microphone? Come on, Conway.
It's okay, I was going to hand it mine.
How often do you guys work with multiple suppliers on the same project? So for example, let's say there's a tech platform and then there's a research agency. Is that something that happens often, or do you expect the supplier to kind of do it all?
My answer will be pretty short. We rarely do, because a lot of times what happens on our end is we couple our subject matter expertise or category substantive expertise, whatever you want to call it, with a targeted vendor. And so we kind of, I won't say we know the methodology going in, but we have a pretty good idea what we're trying to accomplish. So it's very rare. We typically just work with, like project by project, we work with one.
Anybody else?
What about Kellogg or?
Yeah, I would say we're very open to that and would like to do that. I find that I don't see that as an option very often. So it's very rare that I'm working with a vendor and they could say, hey, let's partner with another vendor and really holistically get this. I think that would go a very long way. I think more often than not, there's over-promising from a research vendor saying they can do it all, right? And then that doesn't always go well. So I think it would go a lot farther if they were open and basically said, you know what, this isn't our wheelhouse. We're gonna nail this piece or this objective, but we should bring in this partner as well to really give you what you need.
Thank you. I could add something to that. So I don't want to backtrack us here, but I think there's a point that ties what you're asking to what was asked about email marketing before. So if you think about what was said earlier, email marketing does still work. So it's just, what's interesting to me is I piggyback that on a point that I think Peter Zollo said before, where he said the challenge is if everyone starts to sound the same and you're all going to provide actionable insights and you're all going to provide great analytics and you're all going to provide sharp deliverables. One of the things that I find interesting is some of the most brilliant marketing minds that I've ever met work on the market research supplier side. So they understand, they're keen when it comes to marketing, they understand the needs and the challenges and the rules of marketing. And yet I sometimes find when it comes to their marketing efforts, and it's almost like they go blank and they forget about what they often tell their corporate clients, what they often tell people, that you have to target and you have to do this. And so what's interesting to me about that is you kind of have to stand for something. If you go back to marketing principles, you have to know who your target is or what your differentiators are, or obviously a lot about your product and how you're going to position and price that. But a lot of times, if you're talking about email marketing or you're talking about even vendors working together, a lot of people are they're providing or promising the same thing. Like, we can do it all. We can cover it end to end. And I feel like if it was a little more targeted and you kind of had a better idea of the product market fit and you get more confident you're going to be able to provide that, that resonates with me more. I don't know how everyone else feels, but.
Hi, I had asked this question earlier, but now that I've got the folks here, I'll ask it direct to you. So I've noticed in the last few years that it seems like there's more layers of approvals coming into play. And so I'm wondering what you need from people like myself to support the upsell process so that it goes more smoothly and it all just works better.
So I will say we're kind of like the first stab at it. And then I have to, when we sell it in at a different level, I have to really, it's almost like I have to market it to my boss on like why we want to use someone new. And I'm taking that risk, right? I'm putting my name out there like, okay, we're going to use someone new and it better go well. So there's increased pressure on me to make sure that it's successful. So making the materials that you provide on your company that I could share with my manager, potentially having a capability to call and just knocking that out of the park. And I'd say one thing that he's always looking for, and I think it was mentioned earlier, is pushing back on us. Like, we may think we know the business question, but if you can come with your thought leadership and say, hey, what I think you're saying is actually this. I mean, we're really looking for that collaborative partnership versus like an order-taking relationship. So that's just another thing I think will help with that upselling.
And I guess the one thing I would add is, and I think this was mentioned earlier, we gather the whole project team to kind of hear the pitch, if you will, to make sure all their individual needs, their area of expertise, department needs are addressed by the supplier during that meeting or during that call. And then I will go around and individually meet with the folks. What did you think? Any questions that remain, follow back up with the supplier at that point. And then really it's on me to make a recommendation to my boss, if you will, that we recommend this firm for these reasons. It addresses all these questions. And then hopefully after that, getting all that buy-in along the way, it's an easier selling from there.
Kristen, you want to add something?
I would just echo really great looking deliverables. I think that, especially when you're talking to a marketing team that you're trying to get buy-in, it better look really great. It, goes a long way to making them really believe, I think, the content. And then I think a great example of something similar to maybe the work that's being proposed, a quick but simple example of, hopefully a notable other brand, in my case, that, was worked on would be great as well.
Thanks. Next question.
What are some of the other types of small value adds that you look for in proposals and pitches that might not be obvious or something you ask for on the RFP? Things that stand out and make one vendor stand out from another that maybe you didn't know to ask for but actually ended up being tremendously valuable.
I'll add a quick one. And once again, going back to the theme of technology. So if I'm working with someone and the project, it's primary research and the project has specific objectives and goals, what I also find, actually this might add on to what we were saying before about what helps contribute to buy-in in the organization, it can also be very impactful and impressive almost if there's a layer of outside context that's added to the results that maybe they incorporate what their findings are reaffirmed by, say, a Forrester technology report or a Gartner technology report. And so they're looking at the category or the problem at a bigger level, at a higher level. And that's impressive because when you have people like CMOs and VPs that's how they think. And so it makes that information a lot more tangible to them.
I would second that. Just any secondary information or secondary data that you can add to that. And I would say the other is kind of the work sessions. So as Melissa or somebody else mentioned, we don't just punt it over anymore, right? It's a process, and we want to partner with you along the way. Because as we know, our timelines aren't getting any longer. They're getting a lot shorter. And so worst case scenario is you guys come back with the finalized outcome and it missed the mark or it's not right just from like a communication, or we already knew this from a different piece of research which you wouldn't have known, right? So I think it's just not necessarily overkill, like you're still leading it, but just giving us a peek under the tent along the way just to make sure we're going to nail the timeline and don't have to backtrack.
David?
I guess the last thing I would add to that is, especially when it comes to deliverables, ask me what I need. I don't need the 40-page report with all the verbatims in there. It might just be, you know what, for this purpose, a 5-page summary, or I need you to come in for this. So be really clear about what I need rather than just generating kind of a standard output that you might do typically.
Thanks. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. So my question is about not the first contact, but the second project. We're also in behavioral science, like a couple of you, and quite often in behavioral science, you'll get a client who, probably less in Kellogg, but in other contexts, they say, oh, that's an interesting new thing. We want to try it out. So we've got this weird project that doesn't fit our mold, and maybe behavioral science would be the way to solve it. So they might bring that to us. But we'd love to then be able to go across from that into the more regular work, because we think a behavioral science approach could also transform trackers or, you know, pricing research or whatever it might be. So what would you say is a way to get into those, you know, maybe a new method into an established stream of projects or recurring work?
I think if you have the relationship already, which hopefully the first project went well and they want to do more work with you, right? I think that's the first piece, and coming with those solutions. A lot of times, I mean, you'd be shocked, and I think Julie mentioned this, we don't know what else is going on with our organization. So asking, hey, do you know if there's additional work that this could benefit, and like really putting those options out there with the client you're working with, but also can you pass this along? Who else can we have on our share out call that might be interested in this work, and what other work could they have? I think with the big corporations, I mean, we have a team, I think it's like 70 people. You'd be surprised, and we don't know what's going on half the time. And I have these capability calls, and they're like, oh, we're already working with Kellogg on this. And you just feel like, oh, really? Like, we feel like we don't know what's going on in our own company, so help us too.
Yeah, I think I would add to that, you know, sometimes after the first project, maybe there's a desire to say, like, how about we set up another time to like discuss some other things you're doing and other ways we can help. And I think with that vagueness, it's always like, yeah, great, sure, we'll try to get on that. And it's just like there's not an immediate need, so it's hard to kind of want to do that, even if you've had a great experience on that project. There's just so much going on. So again, I would say, like, the more you can, not overkill, but occasionally send things that you think could be applicable based on our previous conversations, and just say, hey, thought this could be applicable if you guys are doing something similar with your brand health tracker. This is something interesting we did to improve our other clients, and, you know, let me know. I think those go a lot farther than trying to, I don't know, do it right off the bat.
Let me ask you a question. These are the kind of firms you hire to do your research, to help you with your research. What should their role be, if any, with your brand managers and your marketing team? Or should their relationship be solely with you? How should that work best?
This is where it gets tough for all of you. I think it varies tremendously by organization. So if you're working with me, you're probably going to be talking to campaign managers, content managers, product marketers potentially, and it's going to be more of a collaborative environment just because of the resource structuring in the organization. And that's kind of the way of working. Every organization has a different way of working. But I came from the supplier side. I have supplier side experience, and I can remember that it was very different if I was working with a company with a big insights department that kind of had alignments with brands versus if I was working with maybe a new business development client that we were the we were the team that provided everything to that organization. So I don't know, I think it's tough because I think it varies a lot.
Yeah, I would say it depends if you're starting a new relationship or you're working on a project. So if you're starting a new relationship, by all means, marketers come to us all the time with, I heard of, this agency or this vendor or this new methodology, what do you think? And we'll vet it out, and that's great. I think if you're already working on a project, the insights person should be attached at the hip, because we're going to get the questions when you're not in the room. And so we need to know what's going on and what those conversations are.
Questions, all kind of questions. Okay.
I'm wondering if you could describe a little bit your content consumption habits. We talked a lot about, or heard a lot today about all the different platforms we should be on, the frequency that we should be communicating, the length of the content. What, in your infinite leisure time, are you actually doing and reading, and how do you find the information you're looking for?
So for me, I do a lot of, I don't even know if I want to call it secondary research, but my role, because of the way it's structured and being embedded within the teams, I read a lot of information online, whether you can call it thought leadership, you can call it industry reports, you can call it syndicated information. But the reality is it's just content that's specific to my role. And I have to consume a lot of that, or at least I think I have to consume a lot of that, because our industry changes so rapidly. I mean, you think about technology and going into the cloud and, like I said before, integrations and things having to work together. And in our industry, there's a new startup. It's a joke, but it's actually the truth. There's a new startup or two every week. And so not only do we have to assess what impact that's going to have on the business, but we also need to understand why they might be serving a consumer need or serving a business need. Are we accounting for that in our business? Because when I'm going into those meetings, a lot of times I'll get asked to pull together information that's not driven by primary research. It's driven by what I'm seeing online or what I'm seeing in industry events or other thought leadership. So my point is, I think the tie here is, if what you guys all do gets elevated to the level and you have a perspective on some of these things and I see it, then I'm naturally going to have a higher affinity or an equity towards working with you because I know that you get it. And it's really hard in technology because it's so fragmented, but I think, I think everyone's probably different in the way they consume, so I'll let these folks.
Well, I'm an avid consumer of blogs and white papers and webinars. I try to set aside time every day, probably first thing when I get in to, I'll say, increase my knowledge. So I'm always on the lookout for things. Topics that are relevant to me are in the dairy industry. My particular area of focus right now is kids, so I know that is an area of specialty, so I'm always looking for industry-related topics, new methodologies, that kind of thing. That's always going to be on my radar. I find the internet great, that I can do a lot of that at my desk now. It's not requiring me to go to conferences and things. I don't do that as much as I used to, so I'm really relying, honestly, on stuff coming into my inbox that's relevant to me, that I can take a lunch hour and spend 45 minutes hearing about a new methodology.
Thank you. Next question. Yep.
So you guys kind of said how you adopt new research suppliers. What would be, on the other side, what would be the reason you would let one go? Like, what's your biggest reason?
So I would say dissatisfaction with deliverable. Something went wrong with the study. They didn't keep their promises, missed a deadline. Something that was a high visibility study, something went wrong. So I think that really hasn't happened very much. To me, it's more when we switch, it's more a conscious decision of trying somebody else because of a new method or something else different that we want to try, just because we've been using a particular supplier over and over for the same thing, so we try something else.
Yeah, I think under-delivered for sure, and deliverable, I cannot stress that enough, especially on the shopper side, and if we have to take it and turn it around pretty quickly, I don't it has to be pretty good. And then just credibility in the research. Like we have to have a great finding that is going to make impact, because we know marketing research dollars are limited, and we have to really show ROI. So I have to like show some value to that work. So if there's nothing there, I'm not going to continue working with that research vendor anymore.
Anybody else fire a vendor?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest pet peeves would be when I have to like ask or pose a question to a vendor that I feel like it's context they should have. You're working with, me, our category, our brands, and something stands out as quite obvious to me. I don't expect them to know everything or have the same level of background and, familiarity with the category, but I think just know your stuff and try to consider the context, so that, you're not missing any big obvious things that you should be asking yourself as well. And then I forgot the other one, but
I would say transparency for sure. Mistakes happen, deadlines can get pushed back. The more you can be upfront about that. So if we're supposed to deliver this tomorrow, look, there's some data that just looks funky. We are more than happy to kind of push that back, but tell us what's going on, versus kind of after the fact say it's wrong. The other is keep up to date in what's going on in the industry. So we did a big overhaul in the last couple of years with a lot of the agency partners that we use and the vendors that we use, and it was because they were doing the same method the same way for 20 some years. And that could be a solid method, and that's great, but then continue to test it and tell us why it's still relevant and still why it's the best methodology.
I'll just add very quickly onto the end of that. To me, it's complacency in thinking. So I've had this situation happen where I'm going to go to fight, and I'm going to have these conversations internally if a project needs to increase by 3 or 5% or whatever because of cost. But it doesn't really matter to me as much what the cost is, or even, I care about the deliverables, but it's about the originality and the thinking. So if we're doing it the same way, or we're assuming if there's ever that, well, we're just going to do it like we've always done it, and there's no, at least there has to at least be a reasoning behind that. And if that's missing, I just start to question not only the value that you're placing towards our business, but also like just the effort that you're putting into the work that you're doing.
We've had a question about email. We've had a question about content consumption. You've talked a little bit about going to conferences. I want to ask you a question about social media. What kind of your personal habits? Do you get to the office? Do you go through your LinkedIn and Twitter feeds in the morning? What are your personal social media habits? This is not Facebook for your kids, but and once you're at the office, what does that social media activity look like?
I might be rare in this regard, but I'm a Twitter super user, so I consume most of media in general through Twitter, and then LinkedIn as well. But I'm not as connected on Facebook, so that's kind of me.
Are you? Let me ask you a question about Facebook. Are you looking at your feed every day? Are you going into the LinkedIn groups and engaging in threaded conversations, those kind of things?
So LinkedIn for me, a lot of times, once again, keeping in context that I work on a daily basis with a lot of demand gen and content marketers, LinkedIn is a great medium for promoting good thinking. Some of it's fluff. We all know some of it you see and you scroll through and you're like, that's irrelevant. But also, if I can't be at an industry conference, or I can't have a conversation with someone who actually does have a strong point of view on something, if they're sharing that through LinkedIn, and go back to what Andy was saying before about that conversion, if they're getting me to convert through that content or that information, that's warming up the possibility of me working with them in the future. That's just the reality in my mind.
I would say I'm on LinkedIn as well. And Facebook's primarily for personal use. I occasionally have some groups there, but I use it more so for search. So when I'm on LinkedIn or something else, I'm using search terms or search words to find who's talking about this area I'm looking at, who's new in this, and whatnot. So.
Yeah, good. Pass down, Kristen.
I don't use any social media really for this kind of stuff or for work-related things. I think I do use LinkedIn, but it's usually more when I'm searching for something specific. Okay. And maybe that's just because I've found in the past when I scroll through, I'm following the right things, but not that helpful.
It's okay.
Yeah, I would agree. I only use LinkedIn, and it's kind of, I'm just looking at my feed, and if there happens to be something, like someone I'm following, like a thought leader in the industry, and they post something about a research agency, I'll look at it, but otherwise, none of the others that I use for work.
Okay, David?
And I'm a big Twitter fan, so a lot of interesting industry articles that I see there, and just love getting my news from that source.
Hashtag dairy?
Yes.
Any other questions? Amy? Oh, right behind you.
What's the most comfortable way for a vendor of yours to ask you for feedback?
For me personally, it would be, let's say you came in and did a presentation, you answer the questions, the meeting wraps up, and then we huddle for X number of minutes to talk about it. How did it go? What are the follow-ups? That kind of thing. And then I would say there would be another conversation maybe a few days, a week later, as I go and collect input from the folks who were at the meeting. What did they think? So I can give you kind of a full perspective from the project team of how things went.
I'll add something that I saw the other day that piqued my interest. So I think feedback is great, and it's more seamless when it's expected and it's planned. So if you think about performance reviews or any other type of feedback that we get, a lot of times it's daunting because you don't know what you're going to find, but you also maybe weren't planning for that. So I saw recently in a proposal for a vendor that I work with on a consistent basis, because they're an expert in a particular area, staffing, it's not that important, but it was staffing specific. And I noticed that on the timeline, I don't remember what it was, like a month or two after we were done, they had planned for a feedback session to talk about how the project went, what type of content it was thought leadership, so what type of content we developed out of it, what were the opportunities that were missed, how was the demand gen campaigns going. And I thought that was interesting because, like I said, being on this side but also working on the supplier side in the past, a lot of times, and I can't do it because I'm putting a microphone, but you like brush your hands of it and you run away after a project's over as soon as the report's out because you're like, oh, that one's over. And everyone's crazy busy, so they're on to the next thing. But if you could plan for the feedback and you know it's coming, I feel like it's going to be a more constructive conversation.
Can I ask a related follow-up question on Amy's question, which was, and it came up, I don't know if it was in conversation earlier today, if somebody loses a bid with you, doesn't win it, one of the complaints I hear is that, well, they won't tell me why. Is there a reason you don't, or are they just not asking, or are you willing to tell them why? I'd be curious what you think about that.
We've done quite a few RFPs in the last few years, and I am more than happy to tell why. I believe in transparency, and just because we didn't go with one partner at this time doesn't mean we wouldn't revisit them later. What I have a hard time with is don't try to sell me after I've made the decision. So I am happy to tell you why. I'm happy to tell you whether it was price or the method or what it was, but don't try to change my mind at that point because the ship sailed, and then it's just an uncomfortable conversation for me that I don't want to have.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think in general, I'm happy to, give some direction on why, especially if maybe you're a partner that has proposed a couple of things or, are looking to gain more traction with our company. And then I think just to go back to your question, the best, way to get feedback, we have a couple of partners that obviously we're working with on an ongoing basis, and there's a lot going on at any one time, but I really appreciate that one of my main client contacts will always kind of reach out maybe once a quarter and say, like, can we go grab a coffee and have that conversation? Because I think just about general feedback, how things are going, any, missed opportunities, things we did well. And I think just getting out of the office and out of like a mindset of, we need to talk about this specific, project today on this phone call, it's hard to squeeze it in. So if you set aside that time, I think it's a much more natural and like free-flowing conversation.
Thank you. You got an answer?
No, I was just going to add, oftentimes people don't ask for feedback. I'm surprised how many projects we do, and I never get the feedback question. So I appreciate it when a research vendor asks for feedback. And then if you didn't get didn't get the RFP, we didn't award it to you, I mean, ask for feedback too. I think that's respectable, and it would make me look at you again, the fact that you care and you want to improve and you want to know why. So I definitely ask the question.
Everybody's nodding their head. I love that.
I guess the last thing I would add, I frequently get surveys, and being in the survey business, I spend time and care filling those out. So if I get one, I will, respond in kind.
Oh, great, thank you. Other questions? Down at the end? Run, Colleen, run. Okay, we'll wrap it up here.
What percentage of work would you say do you do in-house versus contracting a vendor for, and what types of projects do you typically like to do in-house?
I would say we contract everything. We don't do anything in-house unless it would be some informal, like focus group, qualitative, just a test of the waters, if you will. But typically, we're going to look for a external vendor, outsider, to bring in an independent point of view on what we're doing.
Anybody else?
Once again, I'm the outlier in this regard. So we probably do 60% of our work in-house, only because there are times when we actually go out and we try to find vendors to partner with on a particular area, and we have to make the trade-off decision of its prioritization, like I said, with resource constraints, of dedicating resources to that, knowing that the quality of the work is going to be higher because we're the subject matter experts in that area, and there's going to be a lot more, there's going to be almost as much work required working with a vendor because there's going to be a lot of training and ongoing learning as we're working through the project. But like I said, I think that's pretty specific to our organization.
As the moderator, I'm going to take the last question, if that's okay. They say in business you have, every business decision, there's 3 things you can choose from: better, faster, cheaper. If you had to pick one, what's the one thing you want most out of your provider? Better, faster, or cheaper? I'll start at this end and just go down the line.
I would say better. My neck's on the line, so I want the best I can get.
Yeah, better, for sure.
Better.
Seriously.
Do we all have unlimited budgets up here? Sorry. I would say better as well. But I'm like I said, it all depends on, you have to go fight the case then. So everyone has a limited ability to go say, this is why we have to justify this.
I always thought you got 2 of the 3. I thought you couldn't have all 3, but I thought you could.
True, but as the moderator, I have the ability to, so, all right, so you get 2, Julie. You get 2. What are they?
That's tough. It really depends on the project and the eyes on it. Fast is very important these days. Thank you. Fast. Like if your methods are the same, forget the frills. Just give me it sooner so I can action upon it and move, because fast is pretty important.
You're my favorite panelist. Thank you so much.
Probably.
All right.
The session is over.
I think we are done for the day. Do we have wrap-up comments, or are we going straight to the liquor?
I would love to have 2 minutes of your time to wrap up, but then we can go to the liquor.
Thank you to the panelists very much.
Thank you.